What is going on, my friends? I want to thank you for stopping by. You got Sturk here, doing something I haven't done in a while. We're going to be doing a little bit of a fandom crossover series. Now, we've done this a few times before on the channel. I did a Pokemon-themed basketball team. That's hard to say fast. And I did a Pokemon-themed Avatar: The Last Airbender team. And I had so much fun with both of them. The basketball video was one of my best performing videos I've had, and the Avatar video, not so much. It kind of flopped, but like I said, I had a blast with both of them. So I wanted to keep that series going. I wanted to bring it back. It's been a long time since I've posted a video like that. We're going to call it our Fandom Fellowship series. And it's so dorky that that makes me just love it even more. So, as you can see from the title, Game of Mons, you can probably guess where we're going with this. We're going to be going into the Game of Thrones slash A Song of Ice and Fire universe today. This series does deal with some mature stuff, so if that might be a little too much for you, you might want to stop here. Also, I am going to be going into spoilers, so if you do not want spoilers, now is the time to stop the video. I'm not going to be going like too deep into the story and characters, right, because we're mostly just talking about making teams for the major houses, but at the same time, it's so much effort to avoid spoilers, and the show's been out for years, so you know, I can't really feel bad about that, so you've had plenty of time to pause it if this is not your thing. If it is, let's hop on in. So the houses are a very important part of the Game of Thrones series because these are families that have really risen through the ranks, whether it be through money they have, through competence in war, through their leadership capabilities, through doing dirty stuff to get a leg up on other people, whatever that may be. There are some very important houses in the Game of Thrones series, and we're going to be giving those houses a Pokemon team each. I think we got 6 houses to go through today, and we'll obviously spend a lot more time on a few than we will on the last few, and that's just okay. So let's just go ahead and start off with House Stark. You probably saw this coming. This is kind of the Gryffindor of this series, right? These seem to be a lot of the good guy main characters that you're kind of supposed to root for fall into this house. You can see a lot of them right here. Ned and Catelyn Stark. I'm not going to go too much into the characters, just kind of who they are real quick. Their kids, Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon, and then Ned Stark's son, Jon Snow, who we find out actually is not a Stark or his son, and then his brother, being Ned's brother, Benjen Stark, who is part of the Night's Watch. We'll get more into that, but first off, let's just go ahead and take a quick look at their team. These are what we've got. So as you can see, House Stark's sigil is the direwolf, and their words are "Winter is coming," and we'll get a little bit more into that, but obviously we had to go pretty wolf-themed with this to make sense. Picking between Zacian and Zamazenta was really hard here because I feel like thematically they both made a ton of sense, right? It's a wolf with a sword and a wolf with a shield. This series is just all about war. The Starks have had some great warriors and military strategists in their family. And looking at things, I feel like Zamazenta almost aesthetically made more sense just with the overall look it had, and the shield was cool. But a wolf holding a sword just made too much sense. So both of them do have that great direwolf look. The Starks were known for the direwolves they had that were so powerful, bigger than other wolves, more vicious, but also very loyal. Great pets once they got them trained. The fact that it's holding a sword is great because Ned, who we believe to be the main character at the start, has a huge Valyrian steel sword named Ice that becomes very important throughout the series because after he dies, it's melted down into 2 other swords. And then we get Jon Snow gets his own Valyrian steel sword named Longclaw, which he keeps throughout the entirety of the series, which becomes very important for them being able to kill the others or White Walkers, etc., etc. It having a big sword just makes so much sense for the guy we thought was the main character in Ned, who died early, and his son, not really son, but who he raised, Jon Snow, who essentially does become the main character. Going on to the next Mon on this team, we have Alolan Ninetales, whose ability is Snow Warning, and that makes so much sense considering their words are "Winter is coming." You're pretty much saying that when you say Snow Warning. You're basically saying, hey, winter is coming, right? This ability brings snow or hail depending on the game you're playing. Winter is coming is what they said all throughout the series, meaning a lot of different things, whether it meant like, hey, you need to be ready for the cold that could last years, you need to be ready to have each other's back through the tough times, and you need to be ready for the supernatural threat of the White Walkers / others that are coming. I think this went along with Jon Snow really well, since he had his white direwolf named Ghost that, as you can see on the shiny here, has pink eyes. I think Ghost had red eyes. Maybe I'm wrong there. But this also goes along really well with Sansa. She was a very stereotypically feminine character who, as she was young, really valued beauty and songs and all these tales of valor and glory, and she liked sewing and making clothes and all that. And I think that does go along with Alolan Ninetales' beautiful design type of thing. Then we have Lycanroc Midnight. You could have went with any of the Lycanroc forms and it would have made sense. Them being a rock type really helps because Winterfell, I think, is all about strength, right? The Starks are about strength and honor and all of this and having each other's back, but also like just the huge stone castle they have and the stone crypts they have under Winterfell. That is where the Starks are laid to rest after they die. That made sense with the rock type. And on a darker note, Robb Stark, who was the king in the north for a while after Ned died, his oldest son, who was also killed fairly early on in the Red Wedding, which was one of the most shocking and crazy and amazing moments of the entire series. When he is killed, his wolf Greywind, who was an absolute beast, this huge massive wolf that was always by his side in battle, when he's killed, they take Greywind's head and sew it onto him, onto his corpse, to like kind of parade around and make fun of them. And I think that kind of makes sense with the werewolf-looking theme here. So that's partially why I went with that. But also I just think how intimidating it looks really goes along well with how powerful these direwolves that the Starks had were. Next up, we have Zoroark. I almost said Zamazenta. We have Zoroark. This makes a lot of sense with Arya Stark's journey as we see her kind of take this dark path. She journeys all throughout Westeros trying to basically find safety, and she ends up finding herself training with the Faceless Men in Braavos, who are basically the most deadly assassins of all time. They can literally take someone's face and turn into them and copy their mannerisms and pretend to be them until they're able to assassinate someone. And Arya does that successfully, and it is nuts. And that goes along great with Zoroark's illusion ability, since it can copy the first Pokemon in your party's appearance, and it just goes along well with, once again, being a wolf-like looking Pokemon. Next up, we have Xatu. Now this goes along with Bran's journey to become the Three-Eyed Raven, where basically he has all the stories of mankind. He can see the past, he can see what's going on in the present, and he can see things that are to come in some sort of way. And that makes sense because all throughout the series, as he becomes the Three-Eyed Raven, he basically feels like he's becoming less and less human and more some sort of like being, like some ethereal, spiritual type of being type of thing, which really goes with Xatu's Pokédex entries about how it's often like not fully there, like it's staring into far off places and off into the future. Plus being a bird really makes sense with the Three-Eyed Raven thing, so the psychic abilities just make a whole lot of sense here. The last character for the team being Cryogonal, which may seem kind of weird, but it basically does look like a literal snowflake Pokemon, which I think goes along really well with the whole theme of Winterfell, how cold it is, how embraced they are with the north. This goes along with Catelyn, because when she is killed at the Red Wedding along with her son Robb, as she sees him die, her tears are so intense in the book, it says they basically became like acid and kind of like streaked and melted onto her face. And in the books, she kind of becomes resurrected as a basically zombified different type of character who's like very hell-bent on revenge. So they don't go into that in the show, but the tears kind of make sense because in some of Cryogonal's designs you can see tears going, and it literally has the word cry in its name. The only other Starks we haven't really talked about are Rickon and Benjen, who I do think also fit here. Rickon, we don't really get much of his personality. We just know that he dies young, and he has basically an unfortunate life because he essentially has an upbringing without any real family to be there for him, which is really sad, and he kind of becomes almost like a wild child in the books. And in the show, we just don't see much about him, but it is just this very emotional thing that goes along with the tears. And Benjen is a part of the Night's Watch. He's a ranger who goes beyond the wall and gets lost on a mission, and essentially at some point he basically gets turned into some sort of being that's basically halfway between a human and a White Walker. He almost literally becomes one with the Winter at that point. His character in the books that people believe he is, that he does become in the movies, I think is called Cold Hands. Has like the blue eyes and like very white skin and whatnot. So that kind of, to me, just went with embracing the North. So next up we have House Lannister, with their sigil being the lion, their crimson and gold colors. And gold is a very important thing to the Lannisters because, one, they're very rich. That is how they are able to control so much, is because they're able to kind of just buy their way to power in a lot of ways. But they're also very smart and cunning characters. Tywin, the father, possibly the smartest person in the entire show. He's also very cold-blooded, and he says he's all about family, but he's, very much intensely about their image as well. They've got their 2 kids, Jaime and Cersei, who are twins and who are also lovers, which is super awkward the whole time. And as you can see, they've got their 3 kids here, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, who are thought to be Baratheons, but a lot of people know they're Lannisters, born of incest. Gross. And Joffrey's a real turd, and Myrcella and Tommen are actually very sweet people, though. Anyway, yeah. And then Tyrion, who may rival Tywin as one of the very smartest people in the series. So really their cunning and their gold is really what makes the Lannisters who they are. So what better Pokemon to represent them than Solgaleo, who is a steel and psychic type? The psychic just makes so much sense with how smart Tywin and Tyrion are, and really even Cersei has so much cunning and wit in her character to make a lot of the plays that they make. They really are playing the game of Thrones, and a lot of times thinking a lot of steps ahead of people. And we'll get to the chess side of things here in a bit. But also the steel just does make sense with, once again, warriors coming from this family, Jaime Lannister being one of the best swordsmen of all time in this universe. And also just the steel making sense with the metal, the gold they have that is so important to them. Going along with gold, something that's also important to the Lannisters is their image, and all of them are known for being beautiful and having this long gold flowing hair. So of course we had to look at Pyroar and Shiny Luxray to add these to the team. Pyroar, you could have gone male or female. I went female just because the hair flow seems to be a little more iconic, and I do think the fiery personality makes a lot of sense here. And then Luxray being another lion Pokemon, going with the shiny for the obvious gold. And, it just makes sense to have half their team being lion-themed, with it being their sigil, but also this is a family that were rulers throughout the entire show. Joffrey is the king after his father Robert dies. And then when he dies, Tommen becomes king. And all throughout that time, Tywin is a hand of the king, Tyrion is a hand of the king, and they're basically actually running things. Cersei at different times is hand of the queen and just queen. Like, they go through all these times of leadership, so it makes sense to have the lion aspect of that, as those are supposed to be the king of the jungle, or these animals that are just so regal and powerful that it seems like they're running things. That really makes sense going along with that, since they are leaders. One of Tywin's more famous quotes is talking about how a lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of sheep or something like that. Just kind of an iconic thing he says. Going along with that, we have Gardevoir and Gallade. So this is obviously for Cersei and Jaime, the twins that you just kind of always think of them together, right? Like, they're very alike in a lot of ways, even though they also have their differences. Like Gardevoir and Gallade, you kind of think of one Pokemon, you think of the other. This has the elegant, beautiful looks that they're known for. And what they value, Cersei, once again, she's more smart. She's more about using her beauty to get what she needs to get her leg up above others. And then Jaime, he's all about the war side of things. He's the fighter. That makes sense with Gallade. He's one of the Kingsguard, who are known for their cloaks, so I used Mega Gallade for that. But also both of these Pokemon stemming from Kirlia, I think makes a lot of sense because it branches off into 2. And I think that really embraces Tommen and Myrcella as children a lot, because they seem more like this Ralts and Kirlia type of thing. They seem very pure for the family they come from, as cunning and conniving as this family can be, and as evil as characters like Joffrey and Cersei and Tywin can be. They seem to be very just sweet, caring characters. They seem to be a lot about empathy and emotions, which seems to be in the Pokédex entries to go along with that. But then you do have the other side of things that go along with King Gambit. Like I said, the evil that is throughout a lot of their family, the desire to be in charge, to sit on the throne. King Gambit literally has like a throne in its design. It's the sitting king-looking Pokemon, right? Having the sword on its head makes a lot of sense too with their obsession with war. But I think this, funnily enough, really goes well for both Joffrey and Tyrion, which is hilarious because they could not hate each other more. But Tyrion being so smart that him and his father Tywin are obviously, like I said, making chess-like moves, trying to think ahead, using people how they need to get what they need, testing who's really loyal to them, etc., etc. I think that goes well with the chess theme with Tyrion, but also, once again, the evil king thing for Joffrey. Just him sitting on that Iron Throne looking just like the worst ever. Kind of has that good dark look coming from King Gambit. So, going on to our next house, we have the Targaryens, and this is another one that, if anyone gives the Starks a run for their money of being iconic in the Game of Thrones series, it would be for the Targaryens. Though a lot of the Targaryens, what's iconic about them is what happens before the Game of Thrones series. They were so powerful. You got characters like Viserys, Rhaenyra, and Daemon who are more powerful, who are not more powerful, who are more prominent in the House of the Dragon series that's going on right now. This is in the past. The Targaryens were a very powerful house that basically almost went extinct. You have the Mad King, who was a powerful but terrible ruler who basically went crazy at the end, was killed by one of his Kingsguard. His last words were, "Burn them all." We'll get a little more into that. Their house sigil is a dragon, obviously, and their house words are fire and blood. And then over here on the right, you have the two Targaryens that we start the series with, being Viserys and Daenerys. Viserys dies early on, which is great because he is awful. And Daenerys is one of the most important characters and one of the best players of the game that we see. She essentially rises from nothing all the way to the top to become possibly the most powerful character in the entire show because she has 3 dragons, which is basically like having another army. So obviously we have to have a pretty dragon-themed team here. First off, we've got Reshiram. To me, that makes a whole lot of sense. If you're going to have a legendary Pokemon be a dragon, to me, let's go Dragon and Fire, because in this Game of Thrones series, Dragon and Fire are basically synonymous with each other. You think of a dragon, you think of it breathing fire. In the Pokemon world, not so much. You know, most of the dragons can learn fire moves, but Dragon and Fire itself is actually a pretty rare type combination. So to me, I know there's a lot of great legendary dragons out there, but Reshiram made the most sense to me. Also, I like the fact that it almost has like kind of a wolf-like face. That makes me think of Jon Snow, who's a Stark, the wolf, but he's actually, we find out, Aegon Targaryen. Really throws a wrench in a lot of the plans throughout the series. But that's not what we're getting as much into. We're not going to be focusing on him as a Targaryen. He had his time. We're going to go with Charizard. I know I'm going to get hate for that, but Charizard is iconic. It is a very good dragon-like design. I could have went with something like Salamence, but to me, it having the focus on fire just made too much sense. And with its megas, too, to add on to its overall design. I just like that a lot. Dragapult is a really cool one because even though it might not be the design you'd often think of for a dragon, especially like a Western-looking type of dragon, I think it makes a lot of sense because Daenerys has her 3 dragons. There was like this prophecy type thing in the series of the 3-headed dragon. Obviously, I could have went with Hydreigon based off of that, but I like the fact of there actually being Dragapult with the 2 other little dragons because Daenerys has her 3 dragons, but it's always Drogon. You know, Drogon is the main dragon. It's the one she obviously loves more. Then you have Rhaegal and Viserion, who kind of take a back seat, so they're the little dreepies. But also, being a ghost type makes sense because we, going into the series, think dragons are basically extinct at this point. She gets some eggs. To her, they're not just something to sell. They're not just symbolic. She's going to bring dragons back, and she does so. So the ghost thing makes a whole lot of sense to me. We have Mega Ampharos, just like the family we just talked about, whose name I can't think about right now because I'm an idiot. They had their gold hair. The Targaryens have their flowing white hair. Their hair that's so white, it's basically silver, and that's something that they're all known for having because they're weird and they inbred as a family is essentially what it comes down to. They all end up having the same hair, and it does look really cool and iconic despite being weird where it came from. And who has better white hair flow than Mega Ampharos, who is also a dragon himself? Now, you also could have went with Mega Altara here. I just like Mega Ampharos more, so I wanted to use it. I do think its hair flow is better, but I also do love how it starts as something that's not a dragon and it becomes a dragon. It says a lot about Daenerys' growth into becoming herself and becoming the dragon, as she might say throughout the series. We have 2 left for the team. We have Galarian Slow King, or as a lot of us in the Pokemon community like to call it, Glow King. And man, does that thing have an evil face. That goes along very well with characters like Viserys and the Mad King, who was Daenerys and Viserys' father. Once again, like I said, his last words were burn them all. And tell me you cannot see Glow King looking out on some kingdom and saying burn it all. I could totally see that. That thing would do a lot to take over what it needed to do, which is so funny, you know. Slow King has such a gentle looking nature, then you get this monstrosity, but it's fun. It does have almost kind of a draconic look to it. I like that it's psychic and poison. You know, being psychic, to rule, to be a king or queen, you do have to have a lot of wisdom at times, but this one got corrupt and became toxic and poisonous, just like the Mad King. And lastly, we've got Rapidash, who seems very out of touch with the rest of these, but I do think it makes sense. Obviously, being a fire type goes along with the draconic theme. Obviously, it being a unicorn is all mythical and whatnot. It has the purple flames, which goes along with the Targaryens because they were supposed to have like purplish eyes, which is a really cool feature that I don't think we ever really see in the show, but is talked about in the books. But lastly, Daenerys at the start of the show is married off to a Dothraki named Khal Drogo, and the Dothraki are known for being horse riders. They love horses. They're very powerful on them, and so that's kind of part of her character development. Is as she gets better at riding a horse, she starts really feeling more confident in herself. That's a book thing, but I just thought Rapidash was kind of a cool addition based off of that. Up next, we have the Baratheons, and this is an interesting family because you have the 3 brothers here. Whether you want to call their sigil a stag, a buck, a deer, whatever you want to call it, their house words being ours is the Fury. You have the 3 brothers here. Hopefully that's showing up on the screen because my screen's messing up. Surprise, surprise. But you have Robert Baratheon, who is the king at the start of the series, and you have his 2 brothers, Stannis on the left and Renly on the right. And these 3 have very different personalities. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But basically, Robert was a king, and after he died, both of his brothers went to become the king. And then you have Gendry, who is one of Robert's many kids that he had outside of his marriage, who becomes a fairly main character throughout this show. So looking at the Pokemon we have here, Xerneas just feels like an obvious choice, being the legendary deer Pokemon. Being as powerful as it is, these are 3 very powerful brothers in their own ways. Renly, who is the younger brother, has his Rainbow Guard, which I think goes along with Xerneas' color scheme, and Stannis is a fanatic of the Lord of Light, which I think goes along with, once again, Xerneas' brightness. So you have the other 2 deer that we can look at. You've got Sawsbuck and you've got Weirdeer. With Sawsbuck, I think you could have went with any of the designs, pretty much other than the winter. The winter just looks too Winterfell-y to me, right? That looks more like a Stark thing. I went with summer just because Renly had the Knights of Summer, but the spring look probably would have looked better with, just design-wise, with kind of what their vibe is. I think that matches Renly a lot. And then with Weirdeer, it's a very more stern and serious-looking Pokemon, which really goes along with Stannis, you know. With Robert, he was more about power. He loved war. He loved fighting. He also loved getting drunk and telling jokes and more. And then Renly was more of a lovable guy, and that was kind of his claim was, you know, Stannis has the experience, he has the warlike about him, but people don't like him. People love me. That's what we should be going with. You know, he had more charisma, whereas Stannis was just a better, hardened, earned leader. And so that kind of made more sense with Weirdeer to me, with the look. Next up, we have Tinkaton, which I think is just fun because it just seems so out of place with these Baratheon brothers. But hammers are a very important part of the Baratheons because Robert fought and was very powerful with his Warhammer, just like Tinkaton is powerful with her Gigaton hammer. And then Gendry is a blacksmith, so he obviously used his hammer to make weaponry, and he preferred to fight with a hammer when it came to fighting at the end of the show. So love having Tinkaton here. Next up, we have Embor, and Embor I think makes a whole lot of sense because King Robert is killed by a boar, And he also kills the boar. They both die, basically, because he gets too drunk while hunting one day. But I think it just kind of fits Robert's look, too. Like, as a guy who is big and also looks kind of like a boar, I'm allowed to say Robert kind of looks like a boar. And so it makes sense with the fighting type. It makes sense with the fire being his fiery personality, but also the fire going back to Stannis with his obsession with the Lord of Light, what Lady Melisandre constantly has him like sacrificing people to fire or looking into the flames for the next step, etc., etc. And then lastly, we have Dodrio. This one probably seems kind of weird and out of place here, but basically when it comes down to it, if you look at the Gen 1 model, which is not here on the screen, of Dodrio, it's kind of cool because they all have different facial expressions. I wish they would have kept that better in their designs over the years. And that made sense to me with the three Baratheon brothers, just being, even though they have things in common, they're just such completely different people, but they're all linked within their name and within their claim to being a king after Robert took the throne. I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And also they say ours is the Fury, and I remember in the early games Dodrio using Fury attack a lot, so that's just kind of a fun thing. Getting to our last two houses, we'll spend a little bit less time here. But first off, we have House Tyrell, and here you can see the main characters in the house that we're going to talk about. You have the grandmother Olenna, the father Mace, and then the two kids Loras and Marjorie. In the books, they talk about a few other brothers. Garland is one I'll talk about a little bit. But just looking at the team that they've got, so first off, you start off with Shaman. I did consider Shaman Sky for the Baratheons because it's deer-like, and the Tyrells and Baratheons do have a lot of links throughout the series. But to me, Xerneas made more sense, and I wanted to use Shaman for the Tyrells because it has the big Gracidia flower. It's all about plant life being lush around it. It makes that grow well, and High Garden, where they're from, is supposed to be this beautiful place. Obviously, they have the flowers, their sigil. I have no idea what their house words are because they're not quite that important for me to remember that. But yeah, Shaman's just beautiful and graceful and seems to fit really well in my eyes. Next up, you have Sarina. I think that goes really well with Marjorie. She's this character who's very known for her beauty and for being just so lovable to the people. Everyone loves how charitable she is and how she'll spend time with them. But at the same time, you can kind of see a little bit more power behind that's kind of present, but it's almost more of a hidden thing. She is willing to do what she has to do to rise the ranks. She ends up basically becoming almost queen, or basically queen to like 3 different people after they keep dying, and that's basically what she says she wants. So she's like, I want to be queen. So there's a little more to her than the eye might see. And that kind of links into Roserade, which I think goes well with both Marjorie and Olenna. Once again, having this kind of beautiful type of thing that you see on the surface, but deep down there's kind of like this venomous, toxic type of thing to them too that wants leadership. Except Olenna actually really kind of just wears her personality proudly. She's sarcastic, she's loud, she's funny, she's smart. Great character, and not only does she have this venomous side to her, but she's the one who poisons and kills Joffrey. Good job, Olenna. We all wanted to see him go. She's the one who ends up being behind that, we find out. She uses poison to kill him. That kind of goes along with Roserade being part poison type. Then we've got Vileplume, which goes off along with Olenna again. For the types we named already, you know, them being the flower and plant house, them having the poison side to them, but just the iconic hat that Vileplume has and the iconic hat that Olenna wears throughout the thing was just too fun not to make the connection. And last, we're going to give them Snorlax just because, you know, they can't all just be plants. Or there's 2 more, sorry. And that goes along with Mace pretty well because he's just kind of he seems like a big kind of jolly guy, and a lot of that is what he is, but he is also kind of a prideful and pompous person, and he seems to be completely okay with kind of taking credit for what other people have done and being cool taking it for himself, which seems like kind of a lazy thing to me. So that kind of went along with Snorlax, along with the happy, fluffy look that you got, you know. And then for Sir Loras, he was known for being a great knight. He joins the Kingsguard, he wins tournaments, and the thing he's best at, even better than just straight up fighting, is his jousting, which, you know, Escavalier has the lances and whatever as arms. And his brother, who we don't see in the show but is talked about in the books, seems to be an even better fighter, Garland. And whereas Loras is a little bit more has a little more flourish, has a little more zing. I don't know what the word I'm trying to think of is. Garland seems to be a little bit more of the humble side of things. And I think Escavalier kind of covers both of those nicely. So last up, we have House Greyjoy. And this is probably my least favorite house listed of these. I just kind of find them the least interesting. House Greyjoy is a Kraken for their sigil, which I gotta admit that's pretty cool because they're very good on the water. They're kind of like, they got some pirate and some Viking in them, I guess. And here's the main characters we see here. Balon being the father who's killed by his brother on the very right, Euron. Balon's kind of a boring character. Euron is like kind of interesting, but apparently in the books he's just so much better because he has this whole level of fear and power we don't see. And then you've got Theon and Yara, brother and sister, who they have their moments. You know, they can be pretty bad people at times, but they do a lot of good in the end. And, you know, they both have their claim to being the king or queen of the Iron Islands. And looking at them, when I think of House Greyjoy, a lot of these are water and aquatic themed Pokemon. Kyogre kind of going with how powerful and strong they are. They seem to like be so good with their ships and their fleet that they almost kind of do control the seas. They're a lot more powerful in the sea than on land. And like I said, Euron is supposed to be so powerful in the books. Like, people talk as if he can like control storms and whatnot, which is supposed to be just like this horrifying sight to see. I'm really excited to get to that part in the books. I'm not that far yet, but Gyarados kind of goes along with that. You know, you have the red Gyarados for the shiny. Just makes it look more menacing to me. Like I said, these are kind of angry and almost to an extent kind of evil people. So that kind of just makes sense with Gyarados. Gyarados is that type that would look a lot more powerful and menacing in the sea than it would on land, though it would look kind of scary and mean either way, obviously. Going with the Kraken theme, we have two Pokemon here. We have Malamar, who I almost call it Ursula every time. Wrong thing, Ben. We got Malamar, who is a dark and psychic type. The dark type just makes too much sense with how evil the Greyjoys can be at time and having that Kraken type of look. And then we have Tentacruel, who I guess it's a jellyfish, but it also has a Kraken type of look to it to me, and it's poison for the toxicity within it. But if I'm remembering right, I think in Pokemon Platinum you can catch a Tentacruel at Iron Island, and they're from the Iron Islands. To me, that was just too cool to leave off. With the last few, we got Berserker, who it pains me to have with the Greyjoys, because like I said, I don't really care for the Greyjoys, and I love Berserker as a Pokemon. But like I said, they do seem to almost be Viking-like. They like pillage areas around them, and they say, we do not reap, we do not sow. Basically, other people grow things and do, you know, important things, and then they just go and take their stuff, which is just awful. But it does kind of fit the piratey, Viking-y type thing that Berserker has with its design. They're also all about paying the iron price in the Iron Islands, the Greyjoys are, and Steely Spirit kind of made me think of that. Also, Berserker can learn Payday, which iron price, pay, yeah, you get the joke. And then the last one being Jellicent, which I do think makes a lot of sense with them, because another thing they say is what is dead may never die, and they are supposed to be like reborn of salt or something like that. Basically, a lot of their followers, they'll like drown them and then like bring them back up to cough up the water and see if they're strong enough to live. And essentially that's like them dying and being born again. And I think that goes along with the water and ghost type pretty well, right? Like you're essentially dying like a ghost and you're doing it through the water. Plus Jellicent on top of that has both its male and female design, one looking more like a king, one looking more like a queen. Makes sense with, you know, them having their tradition of kings, and Yara is trying to break that tradition and become the first queen of the Iron Islands. Spoiler alert, she successfully does it by the end, which is pretty cool because she is better than the rest of them for sure. So that's the team we got here with the Greyjoys. So if you made it this far into the video, you're an absolute legend, and I really appreciate you watching this. And I want to ask you a few questions. First off, what'd you think of the video? Give me your thoughts in the comments. Should I have done some different Pokemon? I know a lot of people are probably going to be mad that Aegislash or Doublade did not find their way into the video. I'm sorry about that. Are there any houses you think I missed? Any Pokemon I should have done that would have been better? And are there any other fandom fellowships that you want me to do? Is there another fandom you want me to add to this series. And if it's something I'm into enough, I'll try to make it happen. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for your time watching this video, for just being here and enjoying this journey with me. So I want you to have yourself a great night. Peace.